Time now for my political panel. Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Labor MP Josh Burns. Welcome to both of you.
Afternoon.
Hey, PK.
I want to just start with you, Josh Burns, starting on the revelations out of IBAC in Victoria. Have you witnessed branch stacking in the Victorian Labor Party?
Well, clearly there's been an issue, and we saw that aired probably most dramatically at the 60 Minutes program last year and in the 9 newspapers, and then obviously there are very serious matters that are being raised in the hearings. I think beyond that, PK, I won't be making any commentary on the proceedings. It is a proceeding of the IBAC, and we do need to treat it carefully. I can make the broader point that branch stacking is unacceptable, and that the leadership that Daniel Andrews and Anthony Albanese took last year when these allegations were first aired to basically take membership rights away from bona fide members and from paying members who give up their time and do everything they can to help the Labor Party win government was a really big step, but an important one to help clean up our party and to hold it to a higher standard.
So what should the consequences be, though? I mean, I know you're saying IBAC's continuing, but we know what's happened here. Are you comfortable with Anthony Burns sitting in the caucus when Parliament resumes next week after he admitted to branch stacking?
PK, again, this goes back to what the current proceedings are before IBAC, and I think that, as Anthony Albanese said this morning, that they are serious matters that are being looked into by the IBAC, and that process needs to unfold. Once that's finished, and once the IBAC has done its investigation and made its findings, then I think any consequences or repercussions can be then determined. But at the moment, it's just not right to cut across it and to intervene or comment on it before the proceedings are finished.
Jason Falinski, Dave Sharma, your colleague, was on the program yesterday, and he says the proposed ICAC model needs to be toughened up, to be beefed up, to include investigating politicians, and that there should be one class. Katie Allen also wants an ICAC in this parliament. Do you agree? Should it be toughened up to investigate yourselves?
Well, yes, absolutely. We are not above the law, so of course it should investigate us. But in terms of some of the demands from some people that it have public hearings, well, look, this may not be the policy of my party, but I personally am very I'm opposed to it because I think it's very dangerous. But and frankly, branch stacking, as has been uncovered in the Victorian Labor Party, while undesirable for the Labor Party and a misuse of taxpayers' funds, does not rise to the standard of either criminality or corruption. And I just question whether this is actually a good and proper allocation of public funds to have these public hearings. That is not to say that IBAC should not investigate these things, but it is to say that I wonder if this were any other group of people, whether this would be a public hearing.
Okay, but this is public money. You're questioning whether IBAC should be spending this much public money, whatever it's costing them for this inquiry, to look into Labor Party branch stacking.
No, I'm questioning the nature of the public hearing. So if they want to have a look at branch stacking in terms of political parties, you're getting into some very treacherous waters, which is where IBAC is now. And I just query whether the public hearing nature of this is actually a sensible thing for them to be doing. And I look at the New South Wales ICAC model, where there has been so much injustice perpetrated upon innocent parties through the public hearing system. And when you speak to the architects of ICAC, they will, in New South Wales that is, they will tell you that the public hearing system was actually designed as something that would be rarely used. But as Megan Latham, who is a former commissioner of the New South Wales ICAC, said, public hearings are like pulling wings off butterflies, just more fun. The abuse of power that I think we have seen from so many commissioners in so many number of these commissions means that the Australian Parliament should be very cautious about balancing the benefits and the costs of an independent commission. At the moment, I think what we're seeing in Victoria certainly rises to the standard of gossip, certainly rises to the standard of misallocation of public resources in terms of staff members being used for other than serving the community, but I query whether it deserves the sort of amount of time and effort that's been put into it by IBAC.
Josh Burns, what do you think?
Patricia, I flat out disagree with Jason. I mean, this is obviously my party that's before the IBAC, and it's, you know, makes the hearings may make some politicians very uncomfortable, but it's about holding ourselves to a higher account. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Victorian IBAC or the New South Wales ICAC. What it does point to the fact that having these anti-corruption commissions is important, and political parties it's important that we hold them to a high account in Australia. And it's been 1,000 days since Scott Morrison and Christian Porter promised a federal anti-corruption commission. And it's not good enough for Jason to be saying, well, you know, this is treacherous territory. Politicians should be uncomfortable with what may air in anti-corruption proceedings. That's the whole point of them. And we should be having a federal anti-corruption agency. And if it makes a politician uncomfortable, then I think that politician should have a good hard look at themselves.
Okay, opposites day it feels like, in terms of the positions that you've taken based on the political colour of who's being scrutinised. But let's leave it, because there's a big issue emerging. First to you, Jason Falinski. Are we going to see the coalition sign off on net zero by 2050? And more importantly, I mean, I spoke to you on RM Breakfast last week about One National's proposal. Are you worried about the price tag that you might have to sign over, given the kind of language the Nationals are using?
Well, PK, you and Josh know that I'm always worried about how much taxpayers' money is being spent on things. Look, these are not decisions. Well, this is a proposal that needs to come to the joint party room. But at the moment, I genuinely think it's in the balance. You know that I'm in favour of net zero by 2050. The National Party is meeting on Sunday afternoon. Then it'll have to go to the joint party room at some point over the next few weeks. And we'll see what's contained therein. But yeah, this has been the end of 3 or 4 governments. I've lost count. So this is a very difficult thing for Australians to do, and hopefully we can get it done.
Josh Burns, there's obviously been a pretty significant shift inside the coalition. The Prime Minister looks like he might be able to land a deal here. Do you give him credit? I mean, so many of his predecessors were unable to do it, it seems.
Well, it really depends on what you describe as success and failure in this regard. Net zero emissions is the baseline of what we need to commit to in Australia. Frankly, we should have already committed to it. And let's see what the details are in whatever Scott Morrison announces. Beyond that, it is not just net zero, it's also the pathway to get to there. We currently have our 2030 target of 26 to 28%, which is Tony Abbott's emission reduction target. That must be increased. It must be increased before Glasgow. Anything less than that is a failure by Scott Morrison and by the government. We need to have a credible path on the way to net zero. So I would say let's see what the details are, PK, but we need strong interim targets on the way to net zero emissions for Australia to be credible in this regard.
Yeah, I want to get you on that actually, if I can, Jason Falinski.
Sure.
Would you also like a commitment on higher interim? No, Jason Falinski is your name.
Oh, thank you.
Your name is Jason Falinski. Do you want to see higher ambitions in the interim by 2030, an increase along the path? I mean, it's one thing right in the future, but obviously, you know, accelerating it on the pathway.
Yeah, PK, it's a really good question. So, look, I don't think there is one answer to this, but you look at people like Bill Gates, and Bill Gates but essentially says, look, over the next decade, we can put our resources into abatement, that is emission reductions by 2030, or we can put more resources into research and development, bringing technological solutions forward that will make it easier for us to get to net zero by 2050, if not before. I have to say that I fall down on, and of course the answer is not one or the other. The answer is going to be a little bit in column A and a little bit in column B. You know, if this decision were left to me, I would probably put more emphasis on R&D into technology and bringing technological development forward, because I think that's going to make a huge difference come 2050. I'd also put a lot more effort into making sure that we're not making decisions now that lock us into a higher emissions environment post 2030. So the classic example I would use is gas heaters and gas hot water in homes. Like, we should start now to stop building those sorts of things into new homes, because when you look at the UK, when they're trying to get from 68% to 75%, they're looking at spending billions of pounds on removing gas boilers to replace them with electric ones. So we should try and cap off that liability now rather than continuing it into the future. They're the sorts of measures that I'm looking at. Now, look, all of that is going to have an impact on what your carbon emissions look like in 2030. So yes, I want more ambitious targets for 2030, but if someone said to me, look, you've got a choice between investing in technology or investing in a 1% abatement, then I would tend to favour the technological investment.
Just finally, Josh, you're calling on the government to send Australia's excess AstraZeneca doses overseas. Where do you want them to go?
Well, obviously, PK, it's been a long road to have enough vaccines in Australia, but we are at that stage now. We have secured enough supply. The next place we would look is the Pacific. There are huge logistical challenges in places like Papua New Guinea to actually deliver the vaccines that we're able to provide for them. And so beyond that, and beyond our friends in the Pacific, the next biggest need in our region is Indonesia. It's a real friend of Australia's. It's a place where Australians love to go on holiday, but it's also a place that, despite administering around 1 million vaccines a day, Indonesia is only about a third of the way through its vaccination program. A third of its population are vaccinated, and the vacuum of need in Indonesia is being filled by the Chinese-made Sinovac and Sinopharm vaccines. There are already other places in Southeast Asia where they are supplementing their Chinese-made vaccines by AstraZeneca in Thailand, for example. And we should be having a goal in Australia that no vaccines are expiring in Australian fridges. We should be proactive in this regard. So I'd like to see the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister ensuring that no Australian vaccines go to waste, and that we would, in the event where we have this growing stockpile, be utilising them and become an attractive partner with Indonesia to ensure they protect their population as well as our own. Jason, would you like to see that too?
Look, my understanding was I saw Josh's very well-written article. He writes incredibly well, PK. But I thought that was something that we'd already done. I thought that we had distributed over 3 million AstraZeneca vaccines to the South Pacific, Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. If there's more that we can do, we should definitely do that. Josh's larger point in his op-ed is completely right. We don't live, we live on an island, but we also live in a region, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that this region is virus-free.
Yeah, and just finally, Jason Falinski, is that like a new haircut now that Sydney's open? Is that what's happening here?
Gee, PK, I was waiting for you to notice. Yes, it is.
I did notice because, you know, we're in Melbourne, not open yet.
You looked like
waiting.
a Beatles cover before, PK.
No, it is noticeable. There you go. That's what happens. The hairdressers, everyone has missed so much. I know people in Victoria feel the same way. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thanks, PK.
Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Labor MP Josh Burns.